Okay, coming up next, we have a speech about mindfulness of the purpose of existence towards a true solution to human depression by Venerable Professor Dhammajoti.
Yes, and I think it's a very, very timely topic, and it's a serious issue, but a very, very weighty and significant one on depression. And this will be, of course, given by Venerable Professor Dhammajoti, who is the Glorious Sun Professor at the University of Hong Kong and Chairman of the Buddha-Dharma Center of Hong Kong. So if we could all put our hands together to welcome Venerable Dhammajoti.
Good morning, Venerable members of the Sangha, our distinguished friends. Today I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. In fact, I particularly want to thank Professor Deng Weiren, who persuaded me to join because I thought that I was not going to be able to contribute very much. In the past many hours from yesterday, you have been listening to very high-powered, high-tech, highly specialized lectures. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot about disruptions, and then you're also going to subsequently, I understand, to learn from the successful businessmen how to navigate in such a world for successes. So all these are very highly powerful things, specialized things, which are, of which I'm not capable. So I choose, however, to share with you, perhaps from a more, what you might say, more traditional perspective. But I must say that I've also listened to some very happily. I have been listening, and I've got inspired even from some mentions, at least allusions to the Buddha's teaching, to the life, and so on. And there is indeed a very healthy and positive attempt to link up all these modern technologies and knowledges to Buddhism. I think that's where we really should, from me, that is the direction that we should look into as modern Buddhists. On the one hand, we cannot present Buddhism anymore in a completely kind of outdated manner, since we are something like more than 2,000 years from the time of the Buddha, and we are in Asia, we are in Singapore, I myself am from Malaysia, basically like a Singaporean, effectively. So I fully agree, and I appreciate the approach, and your president or chairman at the beginning of the session yesterday of the symposium, and vows that you people are going to present Buddhism, hopefully without referring to even a word about the labor Buddhism. Okay. But happily, as I said, I'm inspired even, I'm gratefully inspired to those who have actually made reference to Buddha's teaching and even the Buddha's life. So today I'm going to share with you in this direction and to discuss about the whole problem of the so-called disruptions, right? From perhaps a more, you might say, a spiritual perspective. That is not to say that what has been said are not spiritual. The word spirituality is a very fluid term and very ambiguous, and I'm sure you know that there are different kinds of definitions. People talk about spirituality, they also talk about Buddhist spirituality. I'm not sure what all these terms really mean, so I'm learning. I'm learning. But I hope to share some thoughts on this myself. Well, the whole theme is on disruptions, and you seem to have, the organizers seem to have in mind the type of disruptions, what you call disruptions, are experiences, interruptions that you get in a world of modern living. And how do I? It's already moving. So this is not moving here. Okay. This is another distraction to me because I did up I didn't quite do up the PowerPoint, but anyway, I gave the draft points to my secretary, and they were put together. And I don't guarantee the appropriateness of the pictures not put by me. That's one you first. Okay, now, so this conference is about disruptions in the modern sense, and I might say, in a more externally directed, in reference to externally directed happenings in the world. But I like to talk more about disruptions as inner disruptions. I think that's the most important issue in a way. The Symposium seems to characterize disruption by VUCA, and that again, as you know, this is a concept in a commercial kind of a business or management type of context. And I'm not going to comment on whether disruption should really be categorized that way, but I think it is also perhaps one of the useful ways. So this is going to be a bit more traditional, and hopefully by way of perhaps offering a balancing perspective of the whole issue. Yeah, all this I've commented on. Yeah, so as I say, I want to emphasize the inner dimension. You want to navigate, according to the description of the Symposium, in this world of disruptions in order to achieve success. But I would perhaps ask a question as to what we mean by success. What do you want to succeed in? I think those are the more important things to think about, you know, and then to think about the real solution to be one. From the modern technological perspective, you know, now the tendency is to look at the world outside and try to master it, control it, and they feel comfortable with it. Eric Fromm says that this is one way to relate. We need what he calls the human nature, at least on human, I think basically 5 he talks about characteristics of human nature. One is the need for relatedness. So we relate to the world in different ways. A kind of more negative way is to overcome it, to master it, to control it, so you are in charge. In that way, you are related to it, you see? But the other way is to relate it by the realization, the awareness, and that's why I'm talking about mindfulness, of our oneness with whole nature, how we can be one with it. The problem of human existence, to understand our problem, first of all, we should understand human existence. So psychology, neuroscience, all this, I think should not be divorced from understanding of human nature. You might say, well, this is science, this is not about philosophy. But I think psychology in a spiritual sense, from a spiritual perspective, cannot be divorced totally from an understanding, even from a so-called philosophical perspective of human nature. And as a Buddhist, I learned about human nature from the Buddha, from the Buddha's teaching, and this is what I want to share with you. In Buddhism, of course, the center is about the mind. So to therefore seek a proper solution to our problem, call it a problem of disruptions, call it a problem of disharmony, actually is to really study the mind. You are lucky to have been presented with all kinds of neuroscience data and experiments. Personally, while appreciating this investigation, I must also say that I think my principle is to first understand the Buddha's teaching as a Buddhist, and then fit the modern theory into the Buddhist perspective, to say the Buddha's teaching, rather than the other way around. And you know, for example, just to give one example, let's say you talk about Wen, Si, Xiu. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Chintamai, Suttamai, Chintamai, and Bhavanamai, Prajna. The wisdom derived from listening, derived from, I would translate the second word as reflection, and then wisdom derived from cultivation. Well, you can look at it in a different way. From a modern perspective, you can talk about reading books, you can talk about Googling and getting all the information. The more you have, the more safe and secure you feel, and more in charge of the world. You can do it that way also. And you have been taught how to make high power type of notes, and which I think I'm sure useful for in the modern perspective. But as an example, just as an illustration, I would say, for instance, the first type, the so-called wisdom. First of all, what do you want to achieve is not knowledge. So I tell my students in the classroom that I go to teach or I learn a book not in order to amass more information. But the very important for me is to be inspired, to really feel. So I teach my students to feel, not just to think about what they've been taught, but to feel what they're being taught. If in a class, every day, the student can feel something, and that kind of feeling inspirations can last, can transform their life, that's worth the whole course. So even when Sishu also, the type of teaching that you want to learn is, first of all, to decide, what do you want to learn? The whole idea of listening is very important, for example. Today, I must say, modern men have lost the ability to really listen. I mean, listen creatively, listen sincerely, listen with faith. We have lost that. So people go online and find modern techniques. And I have been approached, I'm teaching in Hong Kong, and for instance, there's one big setup in China, and writing to me and say that, please, we want to promote your teachings, and they feel that there may be some value in it, and they have got experts to set up the technological kind of, know-how, and they want my teaching to be, my lectures to be broadcasted so that people from China who can't come to Hong Kong can learn. I think it's wonderful intention, and I appreciate it, but I'm afraid that's not the time I'm going to promote, because I want personal interaction. Learning, listening, one is, what do I want to listen? I want to listen to Dhamma, and I want to listen to Dhamma from a Dhamma teacher, a teacher who personifies, or who embodies, or who at least struggles to embody, because we all of us, including myself, are very imperfect. But we are struggling. We have sincerity. So we can share this sincerity in teaching. So when the learner learns like this, he tunes in. He doesn't just get from me as a teacher, as imperfect human teacher, but he gets inspiration through the words from the Buddha. So traditionally, in Mahayana Buddhism, particularly, this listening one is really listening to the emanation, emanation, the nishanta, emanating from the Buddha's inner enlightenment. So the so-called Buddhist philosophy is a mere verbalization of the inner insight, inner enlightenment. That's important. That makes Buddhism valuable. Otherwise, why do we spend time, money, effort trying to set up Buddhist institution, movement, and all this? What for what? I mean, as Buddhist, as business juncture, maybe they have their own agenda, their own requirement, objective. For a sincere Buddhist, there can only be one goal, and that is to give everybody a chance to be inspired by the whole Buddhist tradition. So you have to learn, you have to listen in that way. Traditionally, to learn from a teacher, you have to go to the teacher. The Chinese will say, yi zi, nisaya. There's a gerund. It is not just, lying down comfortably in the air-conditioned room and switch on your laptop or AC. It's not like that. You really must tune in, and feel that you are one with the teacher, you're one with the tradition. The feeling in that situation is very important, more important than the working of your neural processors, your circuits. It's a heart. The heart must be involved in it, and you can't do that with all these modern technologies. But I don't deny the relative values. What I'm saying is that these modern applications are very important, and we cannot neglect them. We can't deny reality. Today, it's a different world. But to use them, in a spiritual way. And the employment must be underlined by the spiritual concern. That's what I'm trying to, the point I'm trying to make. So talking about solution, and so it's a solution to the mind. All these experiments are fine. Data are interesting, instructive, I must say at least. But they are also hardly ultimately verified. They are being verified, they can be overthrown, that's the whole process of science. Every 5 years, 3 years, they have new theory coming in. Then you have, for instance, the perspective of modern physics. You have, for instance, perspective of, say, Galileo, who thought that the world was square, and then he was overcome and it was overthrown, and then even Newtonian science with the so-called classical physics. And he believed that the problem of our knowledge is solved once for all. What about people who are logicians? Even Wittgenstein in this earlier stage, when he wrote his Tractatus, he thought that he solved philosophical problem once for all, but later on he became more and more like mystic. He seemed to be struggling to communicate through language, and he realized the limitation of language. He's more and more like a Buddhist from my point of view. So it's things like this. So coming back to this whole idea of solution, it's a solution to the mind, and that solution of mind, I think, use as much of modern data as we can, but then link them up, connect them up, and don't shy away from referring to Buddhism. I don't think the idea of attracting the young people, educated audience for Buddhism, follow Buddhism, by not referring to Buddhism is a good thing. Personally, I may be wrong. I can be a bit naive sometimes. But I think, actually, from my experience, I have lived in the West, I've taught in the West, I've taught in the East, in different parts, English world, Chinese world, and I find many highly intellectual, highly intelligent young people, even Westerner, they come into Buddhism, they really practice Buddhism more sincerely and more seriously than even Eastern Buddhists. They are not people from villages, Eastern villages. They're highly educated. They are PhD, they are professors, they give up their life, they even become monks and nuns. So they are not frightened away, they are not put off by a kind of a traditional reference, a more spiritual proof. So I think that's what I want you to think about, reflect about.